This new Spider-Man suit for Brand New Day is astonishing, but there's a problem. In the past MCU films, many of us have noticed that Spider-Man always looks a little bit off, which is why today, when we're looking at these photos, we're getting all excited saying Spider-Man looks real because he's wearing a practical suit. But what does practical suit even mean in this situation? Because in an interview, even Tom Holland mentioned going back to old school filmmaking.
We're really going to lean into that old school filmmaking and shoot in real locations, which is why we're starting in Glasgow, and we're going to use the streets of Glasgow for this massive set piece that we're putting together.
Now, what if I told you whether the suit was practical or CG, it doesn't matter because of one thing. And this one thing could be the reason why this suit gets ruined. Let me explain. Welcome to another episode of Kalex Encounter, and if you've been here before, hell Kalex. So if we look at the end of No Way Home, we already get a peek at the new suit. Pay close attention and you'll see that the on-set footage looks very similar. And this is an important detail that I want you guys to remember more towards the end of this video. So for some context, Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to be directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, who's the same director of Shang-Chi. Now, this is why this is very important. Destin Daniel Cretton on both Shang-Chi and Spider-Man Brand New Day has emphasized the use of practical effects. Even on the first day of filming for this Spider-Man movie, it looks like we're actually seeing Spider-Man in a city environment. You can see Spider-Man's suit interacting with the lighting. Oh my goodness, this suit looks amazing. But you'll also notice that if you do close-up photos, they're going to be doing some touch-ups on this Spider-Man suit. And this is why in the beginning of the video I say whether it's a practical suit or a CGI suit, it doesn't really matter because we have an issue with something else. I'm developing a pet peeve in the filmmaking world that's starting to irk my soul. You got these directors, and I'm not talking about Destin Daniel Cretton, but you got these directors and producers that are coming out and saying this movie was done with no visual effects, no CGI, and that's an absolute lie. For some reason, we feel like just because a movie has practical effects, it's going to be a lot better. And I know it's partially because all of our summer blockbusters have all of these visual effect shots. And so as the audience, a lot of times we'll feel very fatigued. The issue is not that we're getting a lot of visual effects, but that's part of the problem that I'm going to be mentioning at the end of this video. Now, with a Spider-Man movie like this, you're obviously going to have CGI. The reason why we have the stunt suit is because it's going to get cleaned up in post. And it's always been that way in almost every single MCU movie. But this is where the problems really start to occur. I remember leaving the theater watching Civil War and feeling like Spider-Man just didn't feel real. And that's because he wasn't. Tom Holland was on set, but he was wearing a mocap suit. There's nothing wrong with CGI and visual effects in our films. But for whatever reason, Spider-Man just didn't feel real. But I let it slide because I was thinking to myself, well, maybe it's just some Stark tech. But then in Spider-Man Homecoming, he looked a little bit off there too. And so when we look at these new photos, we get excited that he's wearing a practical suit because it seems like we think that just because we see Tom Holland in an actual suit, the outcome is going to be better. But here's the crazy thing. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there's a lot of shots in that where Andrew Garfield is actually a digi-double.
Animation also played a role in scenes where audiences would assume they're looking at practical photography, like the final standoff with Electro where Spider-Man is completely animated throughout, including the close-up performances.
Sony Imageworks actually went through the lengths of actually crafting muscle and wrinkles in the fabric. That first 10 minutes of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not actually Andrew Garfield in a suit, but they took the time to create cloth simulations to make it feel like we were blowing in the wind, and that's something that we tend to lose when we break down the Tom Holland costume. Now, remember when I mentioned the final suit in No Way Home in the beginning of this video? One of the biggest reasons why Tom Holland in Civil War didn't look real is because the suit wasn't finalized. This suit and this suit are completely different, and they're two different iterations. But by the time the movie was coming out, it was a rush job to get Tom Holland on that screen. Now, those were just a couple of scenes. But now imagine a full-length Spider-Man movie. From a design standpoint, none of these Spider-Man suits look bad. They're actually really beautiful. The real problem is that these visual effects artists do not have enough time to work on these films. For example, even in Spider-Man No Way Home, the visual effects weren't finalized until that same exact month that the movie was coming out. And the visual effects department has a lot of work to do because Marvel is constantly trying to reiterate the costumes and sometimes even just trying to make it as perfect as possible so that it matches a comic book panel. Marvel uses so much visual effects on these Spider-Man films that even Flash had to be composited into this scene here rather than just filming it in real life. And this is why Tom Holland mentions going back to old school filmmaking techniques, because they're actually filming on set. But none of that matters if we don't give the visual effects artist any time to go in and really perfect the footage. And so overall, I'm in love with this Spider-Man suit. I think it looks amazing. I just hope that the artists that are involved have more than enough time to continue working on this. I'm looking forward to this movie. It's a brand new start, and I'm finally going to get my depressed Spider-Man that's working through his stuff. I think that's one of the beauties of Spider-Man as a character, that he constantly keeps pushing forward. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next encounter.